Welcome to the Nonprofit Sidekick Podcast. Changing the world is hard work, and nonprofit leaders are wearing all the hats while herding all of the cats, and it can get really lonely. You could use a sidekick.
We think of ourselves as your partners in mastering the unique balancing act of nonprofit leadership. Our goal is to provide insights, coaching, and direction for nonprofit leaders, both the heart and soul of nonprofit leadership and the nuts and bolts of nonprofit management. We're your hosts, Wendy Bertner
and Stephanie Masters. Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about leading boards from the board chair perspective. And we're going to hit on three really key points of leading boards. And the first is that you're running partners on a mission with the executive director, that this is a team sport, not a hierarchy or a silo, and that being strategic in how you recruit and how you assign responsibilities is really key.
Okay, so this is a big topic that I think we're going to hit on a lot of episodes, but just to kind of introduce it and introduce our philosophy behind it. I think this first episode, we can kind of stay up high and hit those 3 points.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about this phrase of running partners on a mission. When I say that, I'm picturing, and you'll hear it a lot throughout this podcast. And if you work with me, I say it all the time because I think it's really important to have that visual that we're not competing runners running some race or marathon or something. We are partners with the same goal of the mission of the organization. And I think any two people in a room can kind of come to odds pretty quickly. You want to point out what you think or what they think or what have you. But keeping that mentality is really important to keeping the board and staff kind of moving forward. You're a runner, Steph. Does that image work for you? Is that something that like you can see how that works, how that should be part of the mindset?
Yeah, I think of this as my accountability partner, that when I'm training for a race, that I have someone that I can be held accountable to and make sure that I'm sticking to the original plan and the training and just making sure that I'm on track.
Yeah, so it's a little both. It's that person that when you're running, if they notice that you're, getting slower or needing a drink or something, they're going to slow down. They're going to take care of you. They're going to make sure you have that drink that you need. But at the same time, keep pushing you, keeping you accountable for what you say you're going to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that's really appropriate for a board chair and an ED in particular, but you can take it out a little further and talk about the whole team, the whole board, the whole staff, however your organization is organized, volunteers even. When you think about how you all are going after the same thing, and it's not an individual sport, it's a team sport. It's something that could you do it by yourself? Yes. Have we met founders that are just doing it by themselves? Yes, but it's so hard. They've either had burnout or they're heading for burnout. So that's one thing. But really, when you think about a team, it's also just not assigning tasks to people and saying, okay, you need to go fundraise, you need to do the program. It's really working together and saying, we're all going in this together. We're all going to succeed or fail together. You look at the structure on a piece of paper, it's definitely a hierarchy. It's definitely, you have the board. The board is in charge. They are very responsible. They have, legal duties towards the organization that the staff really does not have. But behaving in a way that is a hierarchy can really crush the organization. The board are volunteers. They're not there all the time. They don't know the day-to-day, but they are responsible. So we're in this kind of conundrum of, I'm responsible, so I want to know everything that's happening. But at the same time, you're not there every day. You're not there every week.
Yeah. What I think I've learned through our experience in working with boards is that there are so many assumptions that are made when new board members join the board that if you've had an experience where it has been really hierarchical, or maybe it's been more hands-off or more directive, that we see so much conflict come out of that. And then people are frustrated. Maybe people don't really follow through with their board terms. So when we look at being a team sport, is how are board chairs and EDs creating a space that when people join the board, that they're setting expectations. What's the culture of the organization is really critical.
Yeah. And boards that are struggling will go from hierarchy to silos. And that works for some boards for a while. That's a good midpoint, I think. And when I talk about that, what I'm talking about is you define, here's what the board's duty is. Here's what staff duty is. The ED is the leader of the staff, and so takes responsible for all of these things. The board chair is the leader of the board and takes responsibility for all of those things. And the things that would go in one or the other might be, the actual day-to-day management of the budget. Like how are you spending your money? That should be a staff thing. That should be the ED if you're going to silo this. The board should approve the budget and monitor it and make sure you're not spending crazy money or what have you. And if you need to change the budget, you should say something to the board. Obviously, if it's a big change, they might want, to vote on the change or the expenditure or what have you. So when you divide and work in silos, that can be a good next step from a hierarchy. If you're getting those frustrations, if you're feeling like, you talk about culture. I've worked in organizations where it's like, oh, the board. Oh, we have a board meeting. Oh, a board member's coming, and you don't want that. You as a board chair, you don't want the staff to be feeling that way. So you go from that, you go to the silos and you kind of closely define, here's what we're going to talk about, or here's what we're going to take responsibility for over here on the staff side. Here's what we're going to take responsibility for here over on the board side. And that can work really well as long as that relationship between the board chair and the ED is solid, solid. We talk about powerful partnerships or running partners. We're talking about that takes work to get there.
And it goes back to, we've talked about developing a culture, and there's not only a culture within the organization that the executive director creates, there's also a culture within the board, and then you have the combined culture. So it gets a little complex. Yeah. So looking at how both the executive director and the board chair are talking about that. How do they create a space for transparent communication? What happens when things go sideways or there's a misunderstanding or, something doesn't work the way that people think it's going to work? How they handle conflict right out of the gate is going to be really critical.
Yeah. If they even accept it, right? Boards will be like about the staff about the board, and they might just avoid the conflict altogether. When you have a silo, you don't really have to. When you have silos, you don't really have to manage that conflict because you can kind of shove it into the other silo or shove it back into the other silo.
Yeah. There's one organization that we've worked with. I think one of their best practices that I really appreciate that they shared with us in our impact program is that staff are invited to the board meetings strategically, where they're not sitting there the entire time, but there's a portion where they have exposure, that they get to share some of the wins of the organization, talk about some of the challenges, the priorities that they're focusing on. And the board actually starts to develop a relationship. You and I have seen so many times where there is the demonization of the other, right?
Yep.
And so that really eliminates it when you create that space.
Yeah. And part of building a relationship is building trust. Mm-hmm. And how does the board build trust of the staff if they don't know them? If they really haven't seen them, they're putting a lot on that ED. That silo becomes really pressure on the board chair and the ED sometimes. So I love bringing the staff in. I know a lot of people might tell you, no, you never want the staff to talk to your board. There's this fear of triangulation, I think is what they call it in your world, Steph, in the heart and soul world. Yes. that then the staff's going to be talking to the board inappropriately behind my back if I'm the ED, or board members are going to go to the ED without, putting it through the board chair. If I'm the board chair, that might be a fear that I have. So the silos work to a point, right? And they might be a good half step in between when you're getting towards the idea of building that team. And so as we see growth in organizations, we see them do the silo thing oftentimes, and then they go into the more collaborative leadership. They go into, we're all working together, as we said at the beginning of the podcast. Like we're being strategic, and we are all working together. We're understanding how our roles work together. We have different strengths. We have different, not so strengths. You don't want to put somebody in the role of treasurer who really doesn't know how to read spreadsheets or accounting reports, financial reports, some of those basic things. But where I was trying to go with this is that then you start to look at the different pieces on your team. Mm-hmm. And in order to build trust, you have to know what you have to understand them and build that relationship. And from a nuts and bolts side, I know everybody's heard about, or if you haven't, this might be a new concept, building a board matrix. So this is a really simple table where you have the names of your board members on in the first column. And then across the top, you have different attributes, I guess is a good way. Some people look for age because they want a diversity of age. They might look for different talents like accounting, finance, marketing, HR, all of those, legal, you might look at those. Those are really nuts and bolts kind of filling in. Do we have everything we need in terms of skills on this board? So you define the need, and then you see, okay, what do we have with who we have here? And you might add staff leadership to that too. And then you can figure out holes and say, okay, this is how we want to recruit. But there's a deeper level that we do with boards that's a great tool. The matrix is a great tool. It gives you a lot of information. It can really point you in the right direction to start recruiting. But even boards that we've worked with that have checked all the boxes in that matrix, they've got the good spread of people. They still seem to be dysfunctional. That's when they call us. So we see a lot of that. And we like to use Clifton Strengths to help them understand each other, themselves and each other better.
So the Clifton Strengths piece of it allows people to have their own voice, so that when we're looking at, somebody might come from a finance background or a banking background, but that's not their passion and that's not why they joined the board. So it is aligning and making sure that when you agree to be a part of this, and for most of these are 3-year terms, maybe up to 6 years. So we're not talking about a short-term commitment. We're talking about this long-term partnership that you have. And I think the other piece of Clifton Strengths that you and I have seen a lot of success is it's also about building in inclusion. Mm-hmm. And so with some of the boards that we see is making sure that they have representation of of the individuals that they serve. Right. Making sure that they have individuals who have either received their services or aware of them, making sure that we are filling in that piece of inclusion as well.
Yeah, I remember a board I was on once. There was a woman they asked to be treasurer before they asked me to be treasurer, who was from the banking industry, but she was a marketing person in the banking industry. So she really didn't want to be treasurer of the board. And I've met bankers that are like, I'm a banker. I'm not an accountant. I don't want to, do that financial reporting piece. And kind of getting into that deeper, what are my innate strengths? What can I contribute to this board? And then, giving you permission to use those. You might not be able to use those strengths in your work. So using them at the board level for this, volunteer gig that you're doing. And I think for the board chair, recognizing that we get into just the what's the word I'm looking for? Like the stream of, okay, we have a board meeting, we have an agenda, we're going to do this. We have like this cadence, I guess, of what we do. And I think doing something like Clifton Strengths with the entire board really kind of makes you pause and say, wait a minute, we've got this really interesting group of people, and we can better use their skills and their strengths when we know what they are.
And what this leads to is higher levels of engagement, because how many boards have we worked with where there are people who sit on the board, but they don't do anything. Yeah. So it's, if you have engaged board members, things are being done, there's partnerships, there's collaboration, and people really feel like I'm on the board because I can contribute this.
Yeah. Yeah. And we want to talk a little bit about recruitment. And so like you're using these tools, you've got your mentality of a team. And I really think that the ED and the board chair should work together to talk about recruitment. What do we need on the board? What are the expectations? What are the strengths, the innate strengths, but also what are the skills, kind of the nuts and bolts and heart and soul, and what we're looking for, and then going out kind of together and recruiting. I think that's really key. We also work with a lot of EDs or board chairs that are kind of pointing fingers. Well, it's your job to do that. Well, it's your job to do that. And I just want to emphasize again that this is a team. We're running partners here.
And recruitment takes time.
Yeah.
There's almost this courting process that happens through recruitment. You don't want to get to the end of a board term and say, holy smokes, I now need someone or need a group of people within, the next month or so. We should be recruiting a year out from the end of a term.
Yeah.
And so that's having multiple conversations. It's, setting the right expectations in terms of time, effort, what are the things that we're going to need you to do? We both sit on boards. And one of the key things that we just talked about this week in our board meeting is making sure that board members know the time commitment, and then what are the tasks, activities, and responsibilities that they need to have. If you've never been on a board before, you're like, okay, cool, this is something I can put on my resume, and it's so much more than that.
Yeah, and as board chair, it's your job to lead that whole process and make sure that is happening. You don't have to be doing everything. If you have, a larger board, you might have a nominating committee or a recruiting committee or board development committee that is, but it's your job to make sure that that's happening, that it's not just, oh, it's November. We have 3 people going off at the end of December. Hey, Steph, buddy, pal, I need a warm body for this chair, that you're really being strategic about who gets on your board. And I just want to underline again for the board chair, since that's kind of who we're talking to in this episode, even though we know staff is going to be listening too, thinking of leadership not as I'm the leader, but as we are leading this mission and we're doing it together. But you also, as the leader, need to make sure you've got a good schedule of board meetings, things like that are the kind of the nuts and bolts kind of pieces of it. That's part of being a leader. But this other side of making sure you have the right people on the team in order to lead effectively is just critical.
And I want to add to that because I think one of the other pieces that you and I see a lot of is board chairs coming in and they think we don't have to do a board retreat. We don't have to set expectations. Everybody should know.
Everybody knows what they're doing.
Everybody knows what they're doing. They don't.
Mm-mm.
They don't.
Mm-mm.
So the board retreat should be reviewing the strategic plan, looking at the business planning, what are the key priorities, then talking about role and responsibility. A lot of times we encourage folks to do an annual SWOT analysis. Yeah. So if you're not familiar with a SWOT, it's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. And it allows each person to have a voice in the process and also get the varied perspectives of where the strengths and the opportunities are. And that really guides the priority process and then assigns roles and responsibilities to each person.
But Steph, that sounds like so much. And we just need to raise money. We hear that too.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Yeah, no, you really do. I know that a lot of you probably feel like you're in a crisis, or maybe you're constantly managing the chaos of needing more money or needing more resources of some. But trust me when I say, if you take that pause and you think about, and as the board chair, you might have to force this, that you need to really think about, take a moment and say, what are we doing here? What are our priorities? Who's doing what? What are the expectations? Then you will see a team that's ready to raise money.
Absolutely. So today we talked about things from the perspective of a board chair. So understanding that it is that you're running partners on a mission with the executive director, that we need to make sure that people are approaching this as a team sport, that there are times that the hierarchy and the silos are necessary to be able to get things well oiled, to get things moving along, and that you need to make sure that you continue to be strategic about how you recruit and assign responsibilities, and that this is something that you have to continually evaluate and care for along the way. You can't just do it once and put it on cruise control.
Right. Right.
So we want to thank everyone for joining us today. Nonprofit leadership can be lonely, and you could always use a sidekick along the way.
Thanks for joining us today. If you need more information or would like to work with us, check out our website at nonprofitsidekick.com.